Hello everyone, and welcome to this second session of this series of 3 videos on this theme of being a catechist. It's a look at what does it mean to be a catechist, what is our role, what are we trying to do when we are asked to become part of a team of catechists, to stand in front of others, to teach, to pass on our faith to others. In the first session, the first part of this series of 3 videos, we talked about the role of the catechist, and we looked at who the person of the catechist should be in the eyes of the church, as someone who is journeying with a group of people or one individual sometimes to improve their faith, to enter the Catholic faith. And we looked at the mission of Christ when he said, go and proclaim and go and make followers of mine. And this is what we're involved in, we said, looking at what a number of documents of the church says, as well as the Bible. The Holy Bible, first of all, our main source, as we shall also see later on in these 2 sessions, and also other important documents like the Catechism of the Catholic Church, for example, or the Directory of Catechesis. Very important books that we use to understand better our role as catechists. So today is our second session, and rather than focusing on the person of the catechist, we are going to look at the goal of catechesis, the aim of catechesis. What are we trying to do? What is the ultimate aim that we are called for? Because we did say last time also that this is a call. We are on a mission, and as the church says, a mission for evangelization. And we'll look into a few points towards that aim today. And the one simple phrase that I find that is very powerful when you talk about the goal of catechesis, what we are trying to achieve, is this phrase on the screen: communion with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was, of course, the center, the founder, who's the leader, who's the one we are trying to follow. So we look at him, and catechesis, all that we do, catechesis, seeks to solidify and mature this first adherence that originally started, this journey started when we were baptized. And when we are involved in catechesis, we're trying to solidify that. We're trying to make that adherence more mature. That is from the General Directory for Catechesis. And this next quote is from the recently published Directory for Catechesis, paragraph 29. Evangelizing is not, in the first place, the deliverance of a doctrine, but rather making present and announcing Jesus Christ. This difference between just teaching a doctrine, just teaching knowledge, so to speak, as happens in many other disciplines, knowledge-based disciplines. This is more than that. Evangelizing or catechesis is more than that, but it's soul-centered around the person of Jesus Christ, making him present, making his gospel present, what he said in the gospel, making present and announcing the person of Jesus Christ. So it's not just about a textbook, it is about the person of Jesus Christ. This is also emphasized in quotes like these: at the center of every process of catechesis is the living encounter with Jesus Christ. You see this encounter between 2 people, 2 persons, so there's a relationship. Is it an encounter, or is it just knowledge that we have about Jesus Christ? Do we look at Jesus Christ just as a historical person, a person in history, or as someone who we have a relationship with? And as the phrase says, the phrase in red, living encounter. And from the catechesis in our time, this document from 1979, written by Pope John Paul II, the definitive aim of catechesis is to put not only in touch but in communion. And then he carries on saying that word intimacy, in intimacy with Jesus Christ. All words that give us a very good idea of what we are trying to do, what our aim, what the goal of catechesis is. Not just knowledge, but this communion, this living encounter, this intimacy with Christ. We're helping others, building this relationship with this person of Jesus Christ. Very central to, of course, our faith and what we do. Now, when we talk about the goal of catechesis, today's theme, we talk about 4 fundamental tasks related to faith. So we are trying to, as we said before already, we're trying to catechize, we're trying to evangelize, we're trying to pass on the faith to other people, be they little children, young people, mature grown-ups sometimes. And there are these 4 fundamental tasks that the directory talks about. First of all, faith has to be known, and this is the knowledge part of it, which is crucial, of course. It's one of the 4, if you want to, we can look at these as the 4 pillars of this process of catechesis. So there is a big element of this. You cannot have strong faith unless you understand it. So the knowledge, the teaching part of it. And we talked about the Catechism of the Catholic Church and other publications, for example, that express this and explain this in so much detail. But faith at the same time is not just knowledge, it has to be celebrated. So it's something alive. We are very happy, we show our joy, we share our joy when we understand that we are people of faith. We are happy to show our faith and we celebrate it with God and with others in a community. Faith has to be celebrated. And the third pillar is faith has to be translated into prayer. Maybe we'll talk about this in another part of the presentation later on, but faith doesn't stop with knowledge, it doesn't even stop with celebration, but has to be translated into prayer in the sense that the person who understand the true meaning of faith and what they are gaining from catechesis then has to be lived, as the 4th column says, and it has to be lived by doing many different things, including prayer, celebrating, gathering with the community, celebrating our faith on Sundays or other days, church celebrations, other celebrations in different places, but also in translated into personal prayer, be it community prayer, prayers with others, or individual and personal prayers. So the directory then also emphasizes that all of these 4 elements are important. It would be wrong for us to just focus, for example, on the knowledge, or if you just focus on the prayer. So in paragraph 87, the General Directory of Catechesis, the previous edition this is, states that all of these tasks are necessary. And more than that, when catechesis omits one of these elements, the Christian faith does not attain full development. So it's a balanced approach, and making sure that in what we do, we have a place and we give attention and we dedicate time to include all these 4 elements. The faith has to be known, celebrated, translated into prayer, and lived at the same time. Another important point that I find has to be borne in mind for anyone involved in catechesis is that about the integrity, the wholeness, and the purity of the gospel message. Catechesis must transmit the message in its integrity and purity. And as we find in paragraph 111 of the directory, Jesus proclaimed the gospel integrally. Things that look easy sometimes, other things that look hard, but he didn't leave anything out. It's not a question of picking and choosing. And he, for example, said in the Gospel of John, because I have made known to you all that I have heard from the Father, everything. Whatever he received, he's giving it to us in the Gospel, without leaving anything out. And in the Gospel of Matthew, and teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, he said to his disciples, his apostles. Part of the mandate that we talked about last time in part 1, teaching others everything, all that I have commanded you, without leaving anything out. Every little bit of it is important. And this is what makes our message authentic. Integral presentation of the gospel message without ignoring certain fundamental elements or without operating a selectivity. We are not selective. You are not presenting the whole gospel, everything that Jesus wanted, if you are picking and choosing. If you're just trying to select and present and teach only those elements that you find easy, only those that appeal to certain people. Nothing is to be ignored. The wholeness, the authenticity and integrity of the gospel message. As the last phrase on the screen at the moment in red shows, to present the entire treasure of the Christian message. Everything is to be included if it relates and is part of this message. This is, of course, accomplished gradually, feeding bit by bit because faith grows, by following the example of the divine pedagogy with which God revealed himself progressively and gradually. So even in the Bible itself, in the Holy Scriptures, God revealed himself bit by bit, starting from right from the beginning, and then starting revealing himself bit by bit to his people. Jesus did the same with his apostles. Of course, we're not expecting to give everything at once to those we are working with, to those people in our groups, to those who we catechize. But that's what we are aiming for. We are aiming to present the entire message without leaving anything out of the real message of Christ. Presenting an authentic gospel message in all of its purity, without reducing its demands for fear of rejection, because this is, of course, sometimes the reason why we are tempted sometimes to leave parts of what the gospel says out. We are sometimes worried that it will be rejected, forgetting that rejection is part of what Jesus went through as well. And Jesus himself was rejected many times in his life, and in the gospel there are stories about that, there are episodes of that, but also throughout the history of the church, of course, this carried on happening. And at the same time, giving this gospel message without imposing heavy burdens, which it does not impose, since the yoke of Jesus is light. So it's this fair balance, it's this important and delicate balance between giving everything to those we teach, aiming to give an authentic message that comprises everything without leaving anything out that's important, but at the same time not burdening people. We are not trying to judge people or burden them or making their life a misery, because that's not Christian life. That's definitely not Christian life, not the Christian message. My next point is about adaptation. I'm going to call it adaptation because although the gospel of Jesus is one and the Christian message that we're trying to pass on when we are working in catechesis is one message, and one could argue it's one and the same message for everyone, we are not all the same. In fact, we are all different and everyone matters. So the adaptation of the preaching of the revealed world, must always remain a law for evangelization. So although it's one message in the gospel, there's one gospel message, there's one God, and there's one Bible, as a good catechist, as a good teacher, you are to know your audience. And you know your audience because then you present the message in the best way possible for that community, for that person, for those group of children, for that group you have in front of you. Such adaptation must be understood as a maternal action of the Church, like any mother would do. She looks, she knows her children, she knows what's best for her children, and she wants the best for her children, but she does give them whatever is best for them in the best way possible. And it may not be the same for every child in the family. So does catechesis. So is catechesis. Catechesis works in this way because we represent the Church, we are working within the Church, and we are taking on that responsibility here compared to a maternal action of the Church that sets out to meet each person, each individual person, whoever they are, whatever their age is, whatever nationality they are from, whatever their status or standard of living is, taking into serious account diversity of circumstances and cultures. It's one thing talking to a group of young people, children, rich people, poor people, people living in deprived areas, and so on and so forth. So because everything matters, everyone matters, we have to adapt in the best way we can, or think about adapting whatever we do to our audience. We already said that faith has to be translated into prayer. And I think there cannot be any program of catechesis that leaves this aspect, this strand of catechesis out if it's going to be authentic. If there's going to be communion with Jesus Christ, there cannot be communion with Jesus Christ if this element of praying is taught, not just maybe shown or used occasionally, but thought as a process that people in the audience, grown-ups or children, can then enter into this habit of translating their faith into prayer even by themselves. So catechesis has the task of educating the believer for prayer and in prayer, developing the contemplative dimension of Christian experience. And this emphasizes what we said before, that it's not just a question of knowledge, although that is crucially important, because we do believe that without good knowledge, there's a very, very shallow faith, and faith cannot grow. So knowledge is crucial, and we have to put all the content that we can in it, but not leaving out or not forgetting this dimension about teaching contemplation, this very important dimension of the Christian faith and experience. And there are many ways how to look at this, because this task implies the teaching of both personal prayer and liturgical prayer. We pray on our own, and that is an aspect of prayer life that we have to instill, that we have to develop and remind people in our groups, people we catechize, people we are journeying with. Equally important is liturgical or community prayer, that we are not just praying by ourselves at home. We are part of a group, we are part of the church, we are part of the community, so we pray together. So both strands of this aspect, personal prayer and liturgical prayer. Any form of prayer, as shown on the slide, whether it's blessing and adoration, whether it's prayer of petition, whether it's intercession, whether it's thanksgiving and praise, all these different aspects or different types of prayers. as the directory for catechesis says, but 2 strands, both important if this person we are teaching is truly going to develop this communion with Christ that we said at the beginning, which is ultimately the goal of catechesis. That's what we are talking about in this part, in this session today. I'm going to finish this part or conclude this part by reflecting on the parable of the sower that most of us know. One of the best known parables Jesus told, the sower went to the field scattering the seed, but the seed fell on different parts of the land. Some along the path, some among thorns, some fell on rocky places, some on good soil. So some didn't grow, some grew and then withered away and died, some was choked, but some that fell on good soil grew, multiplied, and made good fruit, and it was ultimately good harvest. It is a parable that reminds us of our job as catechists. We are like that sower, I imagine, sowing the seed. We are scattering the seed as we walk, as we journey. You have to walk. This sower would go up and down that field so many times with his load of seed and scattering all over the place. The sower, you could argue, was not successful in everything he did, but was successful in many things that he did. So it's a reflection, it's a parable which makes us think, may remind us that we are in that field, working in the field of the Lord after all, reminding us that there will be places where we won't get a response, reminding us that there will be rocky places, there will be places where someone will steal, like the bird stole the seed from the path. So some people will lose what we give them. But on the other hand, we also know and we also believe that our work as evangelists, as catechists within the church is so important that we take heart from knowing that the seed, and it's a lot of the seed that we are sowing, will go into the soil, to the good soil, and one day it will grow strong, and it will bear fruit. Hopefully that will make us reflect and understand a little bit better what our role of catechists is and the aim and the goal of catechesis is, as we discussed today. We will finish there for this part. We will have our third session then, if you'd like to follow that as well, on more practical considerations of being a catechist and talk about resources that we can use, books, publications, and other resources that as catechists we may want to use or need to use from time to time in our sessions. Thank you very much and see you soon.